Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started now at 5:30. We've got a lot to cover. I'd like to just start by introducing a few folks. My name is Tyler Davis. I'm a project manager in the Department of Environmental Stewardship. I'm joined by my colleague Kendra, Director of Environmental Stewardship. I'm also Angela, Sustainability and Climate Coordinator, and Susan, who is our JS Tech and Water Tech in our department. And we also have Andrea and Rachel with Herrera, for the consultants on this project, will be giving the presentation shortly. Just want to share a few things before we dive in, and that is to kind of explain the purpose of what we're doing here, which is to build upon a workshop that we had 6 weeks ago, talking about sea level rise, just giving the background, the foundational knowledge of sea level rise and what it means globally, and then bring that in kind of locally. And now this next step is to look at threatened shoreline roads that we have in the county. There are a number of facilities in the county that are sea level rise besides just our county roads, but we do have 13 miles of county roads that are under threat. There are private homes and properties as well, septics, there's lots of different things in play here. We've done this on each island, and on each island we've tried to choose a case study as an example that is representative of all the various locations among the county where this is happening. So in this case, we've got False Bay Road, or one basis of False Bay. It has a road that is threatened by erosion, and it has armor, or it has been armored, but it is threatened by erosion and has a huge level of rise. It will be threatened more so year over year. And so we didn't want to come with this message of the roads are going to disappear because the sea level rise without some examples of how we can respond. That's what this meeting is about. It's coming to you with some alternatives with how we can respond to sea level rise. And really the intention is to just put forth those alternatives to you so that we can generate some discussion and really lead from you as the community who's impacted by this, what your thoughts are and how we might respond. We'll go through the various alternatives of not doing anything, to doing everything we can to protect the road, to mitigate it creative ways we can remove the road, and look at other alternatives for not doing it. So if we have Rachel and Andrea and Herrera, they're going to run us through a presentation. There's going to be a bit of a participatory element as well partway through. And I really just want to encourage everybody to have it in mind, keep this a respectful space to share ideas, and understand that we are not coming at this from the perspective of wanting to have any particular outcome other than get your feedback. Any questions before I turn it over? Good, all right, yeah.
The False Bay Drive or False Bay Road?
Depends which end of the road you're on. It's all been named drive.
It's all drive. Yeah.
That's correct. Still show how he made it. Used to be split.
Yeah, it was road, the part of it that was road before it was paved. From Taylor Hill to Marcus. This is gravel. And that was road. Yeah. Right.
I'm not sure which way that's written.
Great, thank you. Really nice to be here with all of you tonight. Thanks for sharing your Thursday night with us. My name is Rachel. I'm a water resources engineer. I do a lot of climate planning and sea level rise, and I'm joined by Andrea, my colleague, who's a coastal geomorphologist. Glad to be here. Recognize some familiar faces. Who was here at the first workshop, just curiously? Thank you. We didn't scare you off. Glad you're back. All right. So yeah, our plan for the night here is that we're going to highlight what's at risk with False Bay Road. What are some of the things that we learned from the first workshop, takeaways for that? Andrea is going to give an overview of the 3 different adaptation strategies that we've identified. And then the interactive portion of the evening, we're going to have you get up, walk around in the room. We have different stations set up with different activities. And so that will really be a chance for you to explore each strategy in more detail, ask questions, talk with county staff and with Andrea, out there, get questions answered, and provide your feedback about what you like, what you don't like, what concerns you have. And then we'll all come back together and have a discussion about what we heard at each of those stations and what that kind of means for moving forward. That's our overview. As Tyler said, goals for today is really just to explore these different adaptation strategies with a representative example here from San Juan Island. And so, yeah, we want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your questions, your concerns, what you like, what you don't like, and use that really to inform decision-making going forward. And as Tyler said, we're all taking time out of our days, so appreciate folks approaching this with curiosity and willingness to listen and learn. So some takeaways from the first workshop. Coastline is changing, we know that. That's especially brought home today with the king tides that are starting with higher water levels. I know, Kim, you had shared some statistics, and I have my phone here just to remind me of what those were. So for False Bay Drive, tomorrow night expecting southwest gusts of 25 to 35 knots, combined with an 8.7-foot king tide on Saturday morning. So that can really be a perfect storm for erosion and impacts your higher water levels.
What do you use as a normal, or just at high tide?
It depends for each location, and I don't have top of mind what it is for False Bay. Do you remember?
What, mean higher tide?
Yeah.
Maybe like 7.8 feet, but also 100 feet.
Okay.
I got that in Kanaka Bay tide station.
Okay.
It's gonna be 8.7.
8.7, yeah. Yep. So yeah, higher than typical. Yeah, and so, this is really kind of just planning ahead. This is the community responsibility, so we want to have folks involved in that conversation. And as you'll learn tonight, each adaptation strategy has benefits and it has trade-offs. And so it's really important to be aware what each of those are to be able to weigh those. But we do know that acting early has benefits that lets us be proactive rather than reactive and gives us more options. So we've been on a little tour of the islands. We were on Lopez 2 nights ago, looking at Port Stanley Road and some of the challenges there. Yesterday, we were on Shaw Island, talking with folks about Blind Bay Road. And then last night, we were on Orcas, looking at Deer Harbor Road. So this is the fourth in that conversation. Of talking about what are the strategies that we have for each of these different roads, which is facing different challenges, has different use, kind of each a unique challenge. For False Bay Road, there's kind of 3 adaptation strategies that we're looking at. The first that we've called no management, which is a little bit of a misnomer, but the idea behind that is that we let coastal processes continue naturally without intervention. So that means allowing the road to eventually degrade over time with erosion and as water levels get higher. The second strategy is we call that protect the road. So that's looking at what would be involved if we tried to maintain the road in its current place and do that by shoreline armor. And then the third strategy would be realign and restore. So what would that look like to relocate the road inland or remove sections of the road and then restore the shoreline in that area? So each kind of an extreme different option, but we know that there's changes spatially and changes over time for when we're going to see impacts. And so it may be that a combination of strategies is the best approach. And a couple of visual examples of kind of what that kind of looks like, no management, continuing to see times where maybe the road is temporarily impassable or eventually degrades where the road surface is no longer drivable. This is a very extreme example, but protecting the road of putting armor in to fortify that to keep the road bed as is. We're realigning and restoring, so removing armor and then creating kind of a new amenity there, like a bike path or a pedestrian path along the shoreline with the road relocated further there. And a combination of strategies is very, very possible for what I can do. So Andrea is now going to give us a little bit of a deeper dive on what is included in each of these strategies.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. So as Rachel mentioned, we developed 3 different scenarios to explore. Now, each of these kind of are somewhat extreme, but they're essentially just like part of this exercise. We want you to just think about and react to and share your values, like what you like and dislike about each of them. We're also hoping that you can bring some of your local knowledge to the site and, help to inform this process, like what you think will work or not work about each of these ideas as local experts living in the area and you're familiar with Fallsview Road and how you've seen it change over the years. So as many of you are likely aware, there is kind of an ongoing problem of coastal erosion along the bank, along the road. There's currently a lot of shoreline armor that's been placed along the toe of the bank to protect it from wave-induced erosion. Over the years, that armor has kind of toppled onto the beach and kind of covers a lot of the beach. There isn't much of a buffer between the road and the shoreline. There's kind of an absence of vegetation there. So it's pretty vulnerable as the shoreline is expected to continue to retreat over time. It's going to intercept the road and, the problems will kind of continue from there as it infringes on the road more over time. As the armor continues to topple and sea level rise occurs or kind of increases or accelerates over time, the beach will essentially narrow. And with that, we'll incur the loss of forage fish spawning areas that occur on that beach, which are really important to the whole marine food web. The forage fish are spawned upon, are fed upon, foraged upon by salmon and many other species that are found in the near shore. You can tell when I trip over my words, I get really red. They're me and my Scottish complexion. Okay, so here we are, looking at some snippets from the recent vulnerability assessment that was contracted by the county. This image here kind of shows the extent of vulnerable areas to future bank recession. Looking at the existing background erosion rates along this bank, we can project those into the future towards 2050, which is shown in orange or that kind of yellowy goldy color. That's the amount of bank recession that's anticipated between now and 2050. And then what's shown in that green buffer is how much additional bank recession is expected to be seen between 2050 and 2100. So you can really see that it's going to intercept the road in several different locations. Now, that's not just associated with the wave-induced erosion. That can be erosion just driven by the water level growing higher and the kind of dynamic equilibrium that the flow of the bank is really in with the water levels. So it's not necessarily the wave action that can actually increase the erosion further. See if there's anything else that I need to add here. There's not a lot of flooding anticipated that will affect the road. The toe of the slope is shown here within the FEMA flood zone. That's what some of these other colors that you see on the map are symbolizing. So that's the extent of where the 100-year flood, the 100-year high water level or 100-year storm is hitting the toe of the slope. So that's just gonna be increasing over time, but contributing somewhat to the bank recession, but that's the main factor here. Other low elevation shores along or throughout the county are much more impacted. So over time, what does this mean? It means that there's going to be required, that additional maintenance is going to be required to maintain the road, to potentially hold up the road. Additional armor may need to be placed, particularly on the eastern extent of the road where that is currently unarmored. But generally, some of that existing armor will need to be replaced over time. And with that additional armor, that will come with impacts to habitat, as well as loss of sediment supply, because the sediment supply that's coming from the bank is actually feeding the beach, maintaining those habitats that are found in the intertidal, as well as the low tide terrace, or those flats. And this is an important area for marine research. It's a conservation area, so that's good to be mindful of, in particular in this area where it's used for education at the University of Washington, among other venues doing education there. And so strategy 2 is really focused just on protecting the road. If we leave the road as it is, those are, all of the impacts that I just described will occur. If we protect the road, to fully protect it, it will require expanding the armor across the full extent of the road that's exposed to the marine shoreline. So that is shown here. Some of the existing shoreline armor will need to be replaced, as I mentioned. And that's it for here. There's a profile view of how the existing shoreline armor will need to be placed to protect the tow bank. This is a pretty expensive fix. So a lot of shoreline armor across this area that will need to be rebuilt. A lot of costs to mitigate impacts to those important fortress spawning areas that will be, impacted increasingly over time with sea level rise. There is that drainage that you see that intercepts the marine shoreline there in the middle of the road that could be blocked, or its functionality could be impacted over time as the road higher. Our third strategy is to realign and restore the road. So restore the shoreline by removing the shoreline armor and realigning the road into a different alignment that would be determined in, with the community, essentially, or with the property owners. This is just an example of what could occur there, to place it away from the hazard zones. So there is no plan for this road realignment. This is just kind of a concept for this exercise, this community exercise to think about. It may not even be necessary to realign the road. It just depends on what the community wants to see. And that's why we're kind of here today, to explore each of these different scenarios and hear from you and start a conversation about what you'd like to see. This is your community, and we're just here to kind of bring some information to you and then hear from you. So just so you know, we're not coming into your community and telling you what to do. So that's very clear. If the road is removed and realigned, it does open up opportunities to resurface the road and add additional vegetation along the bank to provide, functions that would actually kind of help to naturally slow the bank erosion. By having vegetation, it kind of uptakes the water that can contribute to sloughing during rains, provides a little bit more structure to the underlying soils, as well as uptaking moisture during our heavy precipitation events when those sloughs are most likely to occur. It would also open up those forage fish spawning areas that are currently degraded underneath the existing armor. But it would require potentially closing the road right here where that kind of erosional threat begins. And that would potentially enable, removing some of the concrete road surfacing, maybe narrowing the road to be a pedestrian or bike path, so kind of bringing a new amenity to the community or kind of like a more safe place for cyclists. And, people who are using this reach of shoreline for recreation and education. So does anyone have any questions about this concept before I move on to kind of impacts and benefits?
I have one question. So you're going across the property, what do you do? Give their permission or how does that work?
Yeah, certainly nothing would happen without them being completely on board and in support. This is their property and we're not suggesting, eminent domain or anything like that. That's not anything that the county or anyone is interested in seeing. So it's really all a voluntary effort at this point.
But I would say to even present this as a strategy, somebody should have talked to the leaders, I think, but I don't know, it may not be
Yeah,
at all possible. I mean, they're not private landowners that may
well,
not want to do that.
yeah, I totally agree. Yet at the same time, when we're suggesting removing the road, we feel like we need to at least put an alternative pathway out there so people don't think that we're leaving you guys without the road that's there. So this is just a hypothetical. We could put it here. It could be realigned in other ways. It's really for you guys to just explore and consider other alternatives to the road in its current location.
And just for an example, we had this conversation with the Lion Bay folks, and we just showed, basically, alternative of the road just moved inland. And we made it really clear to folks, because people started to get, oh gosh, and it was like, all we know is that it can't stay where it currently is if you want to have it, protected over the long haul. So somewhere it would need to, go inland. In this case, in that case, it's a scenario where it's the main access to get to the ferry. This is an alternative, and we put this up in part because it is, literally like one property owner. It's a scenic byway, but there's no homes at risk. And so what would the strategy around this type of scenario versus another one where, you do have to have, critical access to the ferry, or another strategy, Lopez, people flooding, homes flooding. So we're trying to give those different scenarios to get people's feedback on where would you be at with these different types of things?
No, I completely understand. I'm just saying that it probably should have been part of your due diligence to talk to somebody from the Linear family before presenting this as a strategy.
Yeah, well, it's not a strategy.
It's not a strategy. Yeah. It's not an official strategy. It's a scenario. It's really just like a thought exercise. Yeah. The thought exercise sounds so fluffy, like just so important and obviously.
This is reality.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's just really hard to do all things at the same time.
What about a horse strategy that you just quickly turn around cul-de-sac? Where you've got the road taking off there and where you've got it realigning there, that gives all the property owners to the south access to Cow Point Road. It gives the two properties that have buildings on them right now access to their road. So there's no loss of access to the county road system. And then you don't have to go across that agricultural property, which is unknown. I mean, the R40, you align that road, and I realize it's just a conceptual, but that's part of the San Juan Valley Heritage area. It's 40 acres can't be converted to anything but agriculture. So it's already locked in zoning wise, and you'd have to break you'd have all the ag people down on your backs breaking that, even though it's just a hayfield. It's an agricultural protected area.
Yeah, and this is really awesome feedback that we are here for.
Yeah.
Like, we will be writing that down and putting it on the, strategy 3 notes over here. Just so we can document all of your feedback and include it in our report for the county, and that's the whole point of this exercise. So, thank you, and we'll be writing that down, or you can write it down in greater detail. Because I think, and with these maps, like, this is our opportunity for you can, either Post-its or draw directly on the map what you want to see or what your ideas are, or what works and what doesn't. This is for your community and how you can kind of help to drive the future of False Bay Road. Drive it on the ground, not the road. Yeah.
I have 2 comments. I love the cul-de-sac plan. I would put the cul-de-sac here, you just described it for the first case, but the second one, I would put where the present parking lot is, so that people could still drive down close to the UW parking space right there. There's no reason to not let the road continue to that spot.
I think that's what, the road's gonna be compromised along in that area. That's the deal. That's where the road's gonna get.
Well, somewhere there, they can be a cul-de-sac that's still on Conrad, closer to the Falls Bay. And then imagine, like it or not, my second comment is more problematic. You predicted the strategy 1. No movement at all. The arm is going to continue to over and the road.
And the road.
Yeah, so this plan has the arm removed and a bike path that will be road. It's a bike path that never line, it's not going to be there. You just predicted that it will be road. The shoreline will no longer look like that, Dr. Mark. No erosion will begin to occur.
Well, that's just like the concept that,
The
yes,
concept you just predicted is that area is going to road. It's going to become more of a gentle beach with spawning and so on.
well, I
The
guess,
bike path will either be aimed by one or repeated in restoration or will run away.
well, currently, I think that these are GIS drawings that kind of these are the road center lines, and the road is actually like 45 feet in width. And the amount of erosion from the bank doesn't intersect the complete width of the road. So there is room to have a bike path in some of the remaining stretch of the road, but it's more on that leeward side of the road.
Might be optimistic.
I think to maybe clarify between the two, the no management is not even planning for a bike path. It's just illustrating hands off. Well, sure, but it's gonna take quite a long time to erode the bike path completely out of the existing road right of way. Yeah, and maybe it won't take a long time. That's also possible, in which case, yeah, it's eventually completely lost. What, say again? Well, good question. I think it's different for everybody, isn't it? Yeah, well, with the slides we were looking at earlier, with the first, if you can remember, the orange band was between now and 2060, and that encroached into part of the road in the middle. And then the green, which took out quite a big swath of almost the entirety of the road, that's 2100. Those are, I mean, the long is is just the word I'm using, but those are the timeframes that we're really talking about right now.
The armoring you mentioned that is in existence that is failed.
Yeah,
When was that installed?
I'm not certain of when it was installed.
Would that not, that would also seem to be something that you'd want to look into because
Like potentially-
it failed over time. What is that time frame when it failed?
Stories we heard is that it was built up over time with people, clearing the field with.
Fieldstones.
And kind of dumping there and public works.
Okay, so it wasn't one of those things where somebody came in and next day and dumped it into their spot. There you go. Gene would come up.
Yeah, and then there's county has put rock in there, and for a long time it was gravel. When did it get paved?
Maybe 2012.
That only got paved in the night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was late 90s.
Yeah, it was dirt before that, but it was oiled actually, or put in motion,
Yeah.
but I went and looked back and looked at the 1934 aerial photography. And the road's alignment is still pretty much the same as what's on the photography, but there was a line of trees seaward of the road. They're all gone at this point. There's only one willow left of that whole line of trees. So there was originally a natural beach with a beach berm. And it might not degrade that much once you take all the armor out, because all the fines are gonna come down and basically you're gonna get kind of a more of a natural dune type thing, driftwood. And those kind of soft beaches, I mean, they've been done here on the county where they've taken out bulkheads and riprap, and they just naturally kind of reach an equilibrium with the erosion, you know, feeding the beach. Whereas now it's just slamming up against the rocks and it's kind of eroding out the whole thing. If you allow the water to kind of naturally go in and out, it actually maintains the beach.
Exactly, and after you remove armor, along a bluff, there's usually a certain amount, a period of deferred erosion as the beach reaches that natural equilibrium that it would have had, you know, where a certain amount of erosion occurs and until there's enough backshore or super tidal where the storm berm is allowed to develop. And you have that line of driftwood, and that kind of provides that wave attenuating function instead of it just like slamming against stuff.
Can you go to strategy 2 or 3? So,
And just so everyone knows, we're gonna dive deep into each, you're gonna get the chance to walk around, give us your input on each one, what you like, what you don't like about each one.
So I
And
just want to say that this is where the roads would go up first, right here. People don't realize it.
Yeah.
This is overcut. This
Yeah.
thing is steeper. It's like, it's like that. You
Yeah.
can stay 1 step and fall off.
Yeah.
And this is where it's gonna go out. And people are always looking here. I'm just saying, you know, it gets there.
Yeah, I went there and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I did go there. Like this spot is the biggest risk, right?
Yeah, okay. Just for the record.
So I'm gonna take one more question and then we should move on so we can get going with you guys looking at each of these different strategies and providing. So please, yeah, please share.
Now for something completely different. How old is your road? How long has it been your road along Falls Bay?
Not that long. Not long as you think.
I think it's very early 1900s.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1909, I think. I'm guessing, but I've had some recent interaction with this stuff and I think it's right around there. But you know, and before that, it was probably a trail.
A trail from where to where?
Who knows? I mean, we need historians, that's what we need. We need
Andy, this is part of the old military road to connect with American camp with British camp. That went along Falls Bay because at that time, you could get vessels into the head of the bay at high tide, shallow draft to pick up and deliver goods. And so this may be a very old road historically. Does that make a difference in your perception and planning?
That's a good
And
question.
that kind of brings us to another part of the exercise, which, you know, we want you guys to consider all of the values, all of these different values, and Rachel's going to talk about that on the customer side. I just want to mention some last thing, you know, about the, that strategy 3, you know, what it would entail, you know, removing the road, shifting it to a pedestrian and bike access, which would provide that benefit to habitats, and provide an additional amenity and potential natural resilience to the shoreline by restoring that storm berm and allowing there to be a marine riparian corridor. So that's Rachel.
Yeah, it's great that there's so many questions and discussion with this group, so that's really wonderful. After we do the gallery walk, we'll come back again, so that's another opportunity if you have questions or things you want to share, so thank you. So just some brief directions before we split and get up and moving around. There are 4 stations, 1 in each corner of the room. We'll ask everyone to start at that station where Susan is first, unless there's a little bit of a bottleneck. And we're gonna ask you there to reflect on values as you think about adaptations. So we've identified 6 values: access and connectivity, environmental and habitat health, cultural and community heritage, cost and feasibility, resilience and longevity, and natural character and aesthetics. And so we're gonna ask you to reflect on those, help us understand what your priorities are with values when you think about False Bay Road specifically, and also help us understand if there's any values that we're missing, like history, perhaps. Maybe that is not fully accounted for here, some of that historical character. So that'll be the first one. And then after that, we're welcome to go to any of the other 3 stations in whatever order you want. We have strategy 1 here, so the no management, and look at that, understand pros and cons, look at the maps more closely, protect the road, is that corner? And then realign and restore is that corner. And we'll have county staff at each of those to help answer questions. And we really want to, as Andrea said, draw on the maps, give us some of that history that you know, what you understand about challenges in different parts of the road, where a roundabout could go, where the erosion challenges are. Please help us gather all of that information. With that, I think it's time to get up and we will do this for the next 30 minutes or so.
Last class.
That's fine. Excellent. Yep, you can go in whatever order. I am, hello, virtual attendee. Can you hear me? I know that you don't have, I know you don't have the ability to come off of mute, but if you could type in the chat, or just give me some indication that that you can hear me, that'd be great. I have a version of the same activity the folks are doing in person, for you to be able to try virtually. So if that's of interest, let me know. Sounded like there are a lot of interesting discussions happening, so we want to take some time now to kind of bring those pieces together. Susan and Angela, you were at the first one. Maybe let's talk about the values. What were some of the things you heard there?
And like, kind of know what each other already is feeling. Great.
I'll put some in, and this is proving to be consistent. You can see where those yellow dots are centered around environmental and habitat health. This is a really consistent value throughout the island, and not just in this exercise, but in surveys that we've done, so that really rings true. And I'll just also mention that cultural and community heritage, that would include the history, so the point about the old military road trail, potentially being a part of that is encompassed in that.
Maybe just to add to that, in some of the other sites that we've done this meeting, things like access and connectivity might have been highest, and no reference to necessarily cultural value, despite there being cultural values at the given site. So it's very interesting when we generate this report about this, how these different locations and scenarios play out.
We know it's a hard exercise asking you to pick amongst many different values you hold, and that this also shows that there's a range of values in this room. So appreciate folks being brave and sharing what they were thinking about with that. Okay, so then the first one, no management.
Yeah.
Tyler, you were there. What did you do there? Yeah.
I think this mirrors a lot what we saw in other communities as well, which is that no management is not a terribly popular approach. And I think that's largely because there's a sense of reaction response or approach is not the best one. To just react to conditions as they change, but rather have a plan for them as they change. Of the folks I got to speak to about who mostly put the stickers on this side, I did get a sense the sentiment was because they felt that the road needed to be protected. It was more that there was a sentiment of we should be planning on how to restore the habitat as it degrades. And that there is a better use of the road rather than just letting it fall on the drain, so to speak. Yeah, I think that to speak to some of the other communities, there was a sense of maybe this reflects the sticker of maybe somewhat let it go, and then we see what happens, and then we decide to respond a little bit later. But yeah, overall, I think the general idea is planning is better than reacting.
Yeah. I was at the Protect the Road one and some really interesting discussions. So thanks for folks who stopped by that one. Yeah, I would say, there was really kind of a whole mix here. Some people were saying this is a really expensive option that has a limited time during which it would work. Concerns about habitat for that. So those are some of the things I heard about people saying how this didn't reflect their values. And then for folks who said that this did reflect more what they were interested in, I heard a lot about wanting to be able to access the water, a connection with the history of the area and the road being there, kind of memories and sense of place, and all of that being really important reasons for wanting to maintain that access along the road. Yeah. And then Andrea, you were at 3, right? What did you hear for realignment and restore?
I had a lot of support for restoration, less support for realignment. There was a lot of support for just kind of having dead ends or turnarounds at either end of the road and kind of closing the road and limiting access along what is now that waterward extent of the road to either just a footpath or preferably just a footpath. The dominant kind of voice was really just a footpath. Some people wanted to also see a bike path, but a lot of people didn't want a big bike path that would be, heavily utilized or requiring protection or major investments over time. Because it just seemed to be, another thing to have to support maintenance or potentially realign over time, or that would bring in vast numbers of tourists.
As long as these mopeds can't go on. Either already has a major bike thoroughfare.
Yeah, and then the last one, I think some of you made it there. We asked you to go to the Venn diagram and think across all of the strategies, realizing that a combination may be needed over time or in different places, and how you thought about those different strategies together. So yeah, Susan and Angela, any interesting discussions there?
Following directly on what Andrea said, for those who voted for the green circle, which is the strategy 3, we'll close it there, just leaving a note again that the realignment element of that wasn't always, it was almost like that strategy 4, which was what they were trying to vote for. So I think that there was a lot of support either for realigning or it's mostly to people over, but I'm just like, I have a feeling. But it's interesting how very, you know, and a couple of the other, I think there was like a clear side. People have to do this stuff. In the new things, instead of thinking about like what element of each of these are, does that actually fall? Is that just a nuance that they're choosing, or is there something very specific? I think it'd be important to face and make them lead more to the line. I think it's hard underneath the decisions.
Great, well, thanks, that's always interesting to hear kind of a synthesis, since we can't all be in every conversation. Yeah, now we want to take this to kind of open this up to a broader discussion about what are reflections about hearing that summary? Are there things that we missed? What questions do you have? Welcome to popcorn around with anything else that you're thinking about. Yeah.
So we have had these examples on each of the islands that you've been dealing with. And they are all specific. I mean, I'm assuming that the vast majority of the folks here live on False Bay Road or are property owners there. So this is a very special place for that. But yet there are other spots on San Juan Island that are also facing problems, and obviously your other case studies on the other islands. I was curious how, if you can, I mean, like, if you say, oh, the obvious thing for us to do here is this solution. Now, okay, are we gonna have, or is the county going to have to go through that very same process of totally learning everything about a particular thing? Or are there lessons learned here that are gonna work in Blind Bay? They're gonna work on Orcas Island, or they're gonna work on Lopez? Or is it so case specific that each time you're going to have to, I don't want to say reinvent the wheel, but, you know, go through everything all over again? So that'd be my question.
I can take a start and then I'll probably pass it to Kendra. I mean, yeah, those 4 examples for each of the islands, like very different situations. Blind Bay Road, everyone on the island relies on that to get to the ferry. Port Stanley Road, the homes that live along there, that, you know, they need access to their homes and there's concerns about flooding there. Or Deer Harbor Road, you know, there's a couple of folks there who want to be able to access their properties and hear, you know, different situations as well. So for each one, I mean, there are different values at play. And then also different realities of what's happening on the parcels around there, what are the hazards. So for all of that, planning is a long time period. It takes time to find money, to get community consensus, to explore different designs. So that takes starting the conversation now so that I have kind of an on-ramp for that.
And these are just 4 of what are probably a dozen or so around the county. Maybe they're just 4 examples.
13 miles of,
13 miles.
that's 13 miles of county road that's at risk. It doesn't necessarily include all of the public or private infrastructure as well. So there's quite a few places.
On this island, this particular example, is somewhere between an 1/8 and 1/4 of a mile that you're talking about. Versus, you know, so there's 13 miles. And so I just didn't know how applicable one particular site was to the rest of the 13.
I think it's a really good question. I think it's a combination of both of the things that you said. I think that there will be lessons learned from any time that we would, you know, apply a solution to a particular location, but each location is also going to have its own nuances. It's going to be its own case study. So every case will be different, but we're certainly not going to try to reinvent the wheel for each one, as you said. We'll take the lessons we've learned and apply them as best we can.
Doesn't really work for communities here, and so we have to find some new approaches and build trust and spend the time doing that long range planning, especially for something like sea level rise. But it is a really long range, but things could happen along the way. So having some idea of which direction the community wants to go with these things helps to inform that planning. And then if an emergency happens, if you can align the response with what the community desires. So that's kind of where we're coming from with this, to try to create a new way of approaching these projects that is hopefully more beneficial all of them.
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, given the challenges of this county has with all the infrastructure, some of it's deteriorating, roads up along the shoreline, there's gonna be a lot of expense to the county and property owners to fix all this stuff. The state isn't gonna be able to provide a lot of need, and the county is already kind of running a deficit at this point. So I think we have to look at, solutions to this that are low cost and practical. Really do take a hard look at the budget, so they have to be put together. The taxpayer here, so I see those taxes going to the so I think we have a chance of a win-win of this situation to actually include the habitat there, which is like important for everybody. A lot of us bought property around Falls Bay because we love that environment, and we're either marine biologists or scientists or professors and people that, were in natural resources or close to that. And everybody says, why did you go out to Falls Bay and States? And it's like, well, I like that smell. That's biology. But anyways, the university owns all the tidelands, so they benefit from any restoration work that does. And I've worked in salmon recovery here. We brought, nearly tens of millions of dollars into this county with salmon recovery dollars and done restoration projects. This kind of project would probably be very top priority in terms of getting salmon recovery dollars, because it's forage fish spawning habitat. It directly relates to recovery of Chinook. And there was actually a proposal to take the riprap off the beach that just fallen on the beach. But it got pretty logistically hard to get an excavator down on the beach. So it dropped in priority, but as far as the expense of taking the riprap out and storing it, I don't really see any problem getting grants. But as long as those grants are still available.
There, the windows open.
It's like they are.
In the future.
I think conversely, there probably would be grant money to protect the road. To show it up. So, and y'all don't need to put a trail.
I think there's a different trail. People left. Yeah. Other thoughts on, what we've got going here?
One other thing I'd say is living on the road, 25 years now continuously, and we've owned property there since the 80s. The traffic has really gotten much harder, stronger in the next 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of people that cut through from California Road to go over to David Hill Road, and very few of them look at the 25 miles per hour speed limit on there. And it used to be I could walk across the street and get my mail And now I'm gonna look three ways because people just zoom along that road at 30, 40 miles an hour. And I've talked to the sheriff's office about it, and occasionally they'll come out and put up one of those, little radar thingies, or they'll patrol a bit with the sheriff. Deputies, there's not enough patrol on the road, so the traffic enforcement is very good. Debbie's been hit by, she got T-boned on there by a contractor who ran into her car. There's been other accidents last year, a guy ran off the road in the middle of the night into False Bay. So slowing that down is a safety factor.
Yeah, good point about other benefits that maybe we didn't capture here, like safety or, yeah.
So we definitely have tourism traffic in the summertime down there. They actively promote people to drive on it.
Yeah.
For St. Paul.
The safety issues come up at other meetings as well, as the coastal roads kind of get narrower and narrower, the bank gets closer. And there's danger associated with people going off the road or heavy trucks degrading the roads.
Yeah, I think from Shaw, my main house is Shaw, and the issue that you don't see here at all with your property ownership is there's not gonna be any new shoreline waterfront homeowners, right? The Whittiers already own down to the shoreline in many of those spots, but on Shaw, we have a massive relocation conversation. This is more intended for you, Carrie, if this hits your desk, thinking of some sort of amnesty for shoreline property owners who were previously landlocked, not through the shoreline, who can't afford their waterfront taxes. And so that was a big issue yesterday, is some amnesty period until that property sells, that there wouldn't be a big burden to homeowners who now become shoreline property owners. Not an issue here, but a big issue over on Shaw.
Every issue is a big issue on Shaw.
No. Well, see, we don't even have any land bank property on Shaw, so we did get some attention for our property. That can make up for all the loss and bank property that we paid into and never enjoyed any land bank. So, all these different shufflings of financial debts, and for you to pare down funding for surfboard projects and forage fish benefit, public benefit. I think it's a fantastic project to go down to get to your next priority for surfboard, so you can leverage grant funds, public funds, and public benefit. So it's a great program.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tammy, and for going through this methodology. Okay, this is a good process.
Facilitated process. And I appreciate the learn from all of this. Thank you. Thank you.
So far, people have been, pretty interested in going about it this way. So, we're gonna spend some time documenting some of the lessons learned. We'll be sure to somehow come up with some other way to discuss on the map about move a road over. Don't actually even show it, but, generally speaking, I think, we can lay out a frame for this as, maybe it's a new framework for our engagement with the public on these very difficult and long-term and challenging projects. It just, I think there could be some real wins, doing some good monitoring. For next steps for this False Bay Road. Yeah.
Needs to change it to Paul Bay Drive.
Paul Bigger. Yeah. Sure, that's still. So, this was grant funded, the next steps are to, complete this, process, generate, report, bring that to council, share the feedback, that we received, and then really, we've made a lot of good contacts, to get going and reach out, and each site, each place is different. For Falls Bay, we do have an old, I think I even know it, an old grant for this site to pick up rocks off the beach, but the fundamental piece about that was the Whittiers actually do own down to the old water. So some conversation probably with the Whittiers will be necessary, even if you just want to pick up rocks off the shore. That could be, I don't know, Jen, how long does it take to build those relationships? 5?
I do know that, I'd say this, with some degree of surety, is that the Whittiers are in the midst of a wealth transfer. And who knows what's gonna happen with that property? There's no protection for that property.
So we probably, and I've had conversations with the preservation folks and the government Lincoln, that we talked about it. We should probably strategize about how to outreach and start that process. So that probably would be the next step. Now, if the road gets wiped out in the next couple of days, then we'll obviously also be communicating with Public Works and having some conversation with them about where this process is at, and hopefully be able to work with them to make sure that their thinking aligns with the community values. So that's an important aspect of this. But I think for this particular site, the next big step is how to engage years.
And there will be more public, public.
Oh, yeah. As we are able to secure funding and keep the momentum moving, and some of the other sites, like Warren Bay, is on the transportation improvements. There's an opportunity to help shepherd that to a good place. And then in the case of Port Stanley, we have that as in the capital improvement program in the clean water utility, because they are currently having septic system flooding and homes with very flooding and water quality and a variety of other issues. Each one has a story, and then West Sound, you do have some work in Pro Valley, and there is also some threats there for the road that Public Works has some resources to do. Still, it's incremental. You're not going to see a big, huge shift all at once, but the idea is that, there's that endless pressure against the cloud. Just kind of steady, as we go, to try to move the needle on some of these projects.
What happens with the 13 miles of the county roads, right? And whenever I go out to Davidson Head, that's private, right? But I mean, you just look at that, and you're like, oh my goodness. So what's the county's role in protecting those homes out there?
Yeah. So we had that discussion for Lopez, and really helping that community understand that the county is not in the business of elevating their homes or replacing their septic systems. By the end of that conversation, we gave them all the scenarios, we went all the way around. And at the very end, they said, what about buyouts? Like, that group finally came full circle in that conversation that we're just delaying them because they're going to be underwater. And that's hard. Like, there were some people there who like, Yeah.
That's a risk to take, probably.
Right, it is, but you know, these are generational homes, they've been there, a lot of them have been there a long time, it's past the families. But, you know, they were then asking these questions, well, forgive me, I will maybe. You know, at some point, but this is, you know, they've got a lovely marsh behind, so maybe. So these are the, you know, who's to say where these conversations might take us, but what we've been very clear with people is that we want this to be community driven. Because we think that if once you get that buy-in, you can, then we don't want to force anything. We just want to help facilitate, getting to a good place.
Yeah, what's happening is, I mean, the insurance companies are basically getting owners to the company. We either can't sell it for somebody who needs a mortgage. And that's happening all of them. So that's what we need to start on. But there's no future that's always going to be first. What advise you?
But there are other places where people are elevating and they have all the money over there and it's not a problem because there's 9 months out of the year, that place is permanent. So we'll see how these communities evolve and. Yeah, nothing else.
History probably said, I know, the county has done nothing but probably kind of sort of like thought that out of the wash and everything like that. So they hear, you know, say, well, there's nothing we can do about a property. The first one would stop being constructed and would try to save it from. Whether it be a bulkhead, whether it be wood bulkhead, whether it be cement bulkhead, whether it be there's something, but they're totally believe they know. Sit on the front porch and wait for it to fall in the water. So I don't think that you can say, you know, we don't have to, you can't help yourself.
And I think a community aspect of that and help them with the state and federal laws are.
I get that part.
Or shorter,
That part.
yeah.
But it was there first. They're watching it go away.
Yeah, that's a real big concern, particularly the folks on, you know, eroding banks and that sort of thing. Yeah, that. It's
Be
very-
models or not, I don't think that's fair for them to be watching about and throw out and say, well, no, we're not going to help you. But by the way, they can't. That's right.
Yep, it is, these are awful, wicked problems. And they're easy to solve. We find them. So you just gotta keep working together and try to find answers and solutions. These things, and, you know, the Princess San Juan's has a shore friendly program, and there are folks that are actively moving their homes back and getting funding and getting resources to do things. So they don't have to go ahead, but they get their home back, and then they feel like. So there are programs out there. You just gotta tap into the right space, and it's not everybody's gonna be able to do that, but there will be some that and that's we're doing the best we can. Recognizing we have limited resources, but yeah, it's good job. Yeah, we're about to say
Thank you, everybody. I'm participating. It's been great for me. Thank you very much. Great job. Good job. Good job.